Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar panel. I'm Sophie Harris, Content Manager here at ChoiceWorks, and our topic today is going to be end-to-end IT process automation. We have a great panelist of speakers here today who have deep experience in the intelligent automation space, so we're really looking forward to an engaging discussion. I just want to cover a few things before we get started. Firstly, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar to all registrants, so you can expect to see that a little later in the week. Secondly, we really want this conversation to be interactive, so we encourage you to leave us questions and comments in the questions box, and we will be responding to some of those at the end of today's webinar. Now I'm going to hand things off to our moderator for today, Frank Casal, the co-founder and chief revenue officer here at ChoiceWorks and founder of ERPA AI. Frank?
Great, thanks, Sophie, and welcome all. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. I have the pleasure here of being joined by two industry experts that also happen to be personal friends. I'm delighted, looking forward to this session and looking forward to a productive and informative and hopefully a fun discussion. As Sophie mentioned, this is designed to be less of a typical webinar. There will be no death by PowerPoint here. This is really, we will be discussing initially ourselves, myself, Olivier, and Pascal, but the goal is really to open up for a broader discussion. I do have starter questions here, but your questions are more important than mine. Before we dive in, let me just do some quick introductions. I'm joined here by people that you may know. These are prominent figures, very active on LinkedIn, very active in the marketplace. Olivier Gomez and Pascal Bornet. And these are folks that if you're not connected with them on LinkedIn, you should already. I would say these people are not observers, these guys are in the game. They're doing it. They know the reality. They could separate hype from hyper automation. We're going to be doing a little bit of that today. And the topic, as you see here on the slide in front of you, is what we will be talking about. We will not be talking about RPA. We will be talking about true end-to-end process automation. We will be primarily talking about intelligent automation. And we will be talking about why that in spite of the fact that most people are talking about hyper automation, most people continue to struggle. So Pascal, let me start with you. First off, I want to make sure we talk about your book just as a quick, I think maybe you have a quick slide here. We'd be remiss if this is less of a commercial as much as most of the people in attendance are probably aware of your book. Hopefully they already have it. And I was fortunate to be kind of a part of the discussion and be kind of in your inner circle as you were creating it. It's an awesome book. I just want to tout it for those of you in attendance here. If you don't have it already, get hold of it. I'm assuming, Pascal, it's on Amazon and all the usual places. Is that a fair assumption?
Correct. And profits donated to charities in charge of educating people in needs for new technologies.
Oh, okay, super. That's a good point to remind those. Thank you so much. So Pascal, let's dive right in, and I'd be remiss if we didn't start with a definition. Now I can tell you, if I put three experts in a room, I will probably get three different definitions of intelligent automation. But you're here, so let's put you on the spot. Plus you wrote the book, so you must be an expert, right? How would you define intelligent automation, and how would you differentiate it from, let's say, traditional RPA that many in attendance are pretty much fluent with?
Yes, very good question to start with. And I've had the same issue. And when I say it's also my co-authors and I, so Jan Barkin and Jochen Wirtz. When we wrote the book, we needed a definition. We needed to set down the ground and the foundation of what is intelligent automation. So we couldn't do it by ourselves. I mean, we've tried to do it. We drafted something, but as you said, we are only 3 out of thousands of experts in this field. So what we did is we organized a survey, and we got the answer from more than 200 IA experts. And the common definition that we got from this is intelligent automation is a combination of methods that involves people, organizations, and processes, a combination of methods and technologies that involve machine learning, low-code platforms, robotic process automation, and much more. I think you've heard about different terms like hyper-automation, like cognitive automation. We've come to the point that we think those words are synonyms, okay? Or at least the nuances between those terms do not deserve spending time discussing them. So IA focuses on automating the work that is done by what we call knowledge workers or office workers, okay? So basically the people whose principal capital is knowledge, okay? So those people who don't produce using their hands, but produce value using their brains. And this includes programmers, physicians, pharmacists, architects, engineers, medical doctors, designers, accountants. I mean, you can name, and I am, you are, we are all, and I think on this call, you listening to us, you are all knowledge workers. So you are all concerned, you are all in the scope of potentially getting the benefits of intelligent automation.
Okay, no, fair enough. So Olivier, first off, I want to say that if this webinar goes well, I want to make sure it gets OG approved on LinkedIn. Okay, this is a much sought after approval that many in the marketplace want. So we shall see. Maybe self-serving if you approve it, but hopefully. So let me ask you this, Olivier, you've been in the trenches for many years. You've worked with RPA of you know, the both from strategy to implementation. So you know what's easy, what's tough, where there are technology issues, where there are people issues, process, etc. When you think about this shift from RPA to intelligent automation, why do you see such a move in this direction? Is RPA leaving many customers just wanting so much? Is it more of a, is there a lacking, if you will, in the RPA offering, or is it more just a natural evolution of people looking for more power, more impact? How do you see it?
Yeah, so this is a very typical question around when we look at RPA. What is RPA doing and where it is going? And very naturally, when you try to automate, you realize that it's not just about one tool, it's about an ecosystem of technology. When you look at any industries, any business processes, when you start really discovering, deep diving, you quickly realize that you need number of technology, you need to add them up, you need to connect them up. And RPA, although it's a great technology, needs to be augmented by other tools, other technology, in order to really go after all the different tasks, all the different opportunity that we have when automating a process. So the way I describe this is very simple. We felt the need in the industry to add a brain to the bot, and that's the AI, that's the ML. We felt the need to add language to the bot, so the bot can understand humans and talk back to human. Those are, you know, chatbot, voice bot, NLP type of technology. And we felt the need to add some eyes so it could read and understand what is not yet digitized, i.e. the analog world. So again, it's a very natural evolution, and there's nothing wrong with RPA, there's nothing wrong with any of those technologies, just a matter of adding them up all together to get the full benefit. And that's what the intelligent automation ecosystem is all about.
No, I agree. It's a fair point. And Pascal, I could tell you personally, you know, as I made my move into the software new venture world, my attraction with ChoiceWorks to this space being intelligent automation of a full end-to-end process, right? If you think about the theme here is first off, I was intrigued by, you know, the concept of, as Olivier mentions, adding a brain. But then I also saw limitations of maybe simple automation of a task. So then you say, okay, so then if you get intelligent automation of a task, it's still a task. So now if you take this intersection of intelligent and adaptive automation applied to a full end-to-end process, I saw that as a game changer for me personally. That's where I invested my time and money based on my quote unquote day job today. So that's what I see as the game changer, both from the standpoint of impact on labor dependency, and also as any shot one has, I think, at hyper automation needs to incorporate intelligent automation of end-to-end process. That's how I see it. Do you agree with all or part of that, or what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, it's completely aligned. And so just to rephrase it, so I think IA is aimed at automating end-to-end business processes in a computerized environment. Okay, we are not talking anymore about isolated tasks, piecemeal systems. We are talking about systems that are connected the one to the others. And IA delivers business outcomes on behalf of the employees. So it works hands in hands with the employees to deliver faster, better, and cheaper services. And I like to give an example. And for example, end-to-end process that any company has is called procure to pay. And this end-to-end process starts with the procurement of services or goods from a vendor and ends with the payment of this vendor. And just to go through the main activities that's in the flow of this end-to-end process. The first one is about selecting the vendor. You want to use the right vendors, and very often you will use machine learning to select based on your habits and based on the scoring and rating of those vendors, the best one that fits for you. The second one is about sending orders to those vendors, and very often you will use workflow platforms that helps to route the data and get acceptance and approvals and so on. Then you receive and you process the invoices after you've got the goods from those vendors, and this is very well done with natural language processing. And finally, you will pay those vendors, and very often, because it's a rule-based activity, RPA will be a good fit.
No, this makes total sense. And Olivia, I have a question I want to jump to with you for a moment related to this, but I'm looking at the clock and I believe I'm supposed to do a poll question now. So Laura, if you could put, kind of post the question. So here's where just a quick survey for those of you in attendance. Take a look at the question and there it is right there, right? So we want to get a sense of how far along you are. So if you are a practitioner here, obviously you're kind of voting as yourself. If you're an advisor or a provider, then you could think about maybe either your organization or a client that you're working with. How far along are you as far as intelligent automation as applied to a particular department? Are you working on the first one? Is it 2 to 4? Or are you kind of in the 5+ platinum club? So take a few seconds, pick one, and then we will, I guess, crunch this and let's see what the results are. OG, what do you think is going to be the most prominent? What do you think? You get to bet, you get to forecast.
2 to 4.
Yeah, I think you're right. So let's see.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So yeah, and a good point that we mentioned in the book is, according to a recent Deloitte survey, IA has a rate of adoption of about 50%, meaning 50% of the companies around the world have already started their journey into IA. But then when you dip a bit further, McKinsey says only 15% of those companies have been able to scale IA. And when they say scale, they mean companies that have been able to implement it in at least 3 functions or divisions in their environment. So you can see that, yeah, what the market says.
Well, so think of it this way, right? And this may be more reflective of our audience here today, if you will. But clearly, the majority of folks are kind of on the front end of this. And then second place being more, but it's pretty close, right? As I look at it, 50-42.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's really the same outcome as I just mentioned.
So, all right, super. So if we could flip back, Laura, thank you so much. If we could flip back to the video. So, Olivier, Pascal talked about scaling. I was going to wait till a little bit later, but being that he brought this up, right? So yeah, it's, you know, when I think about hyper automation, I think about it, it's almost kind of like the weather. Everybody's talking about it, but nobody can do anything, right? We just deal with it, and it is what it is. The majority of people are not anywhere near hyper automating. It's more aspirational, and there are many challenges. So from your experience, do you see the challenges primarily relating to just maybe a lack of understanding? Is it more about the technology, the complexity? Kind of where do you go? Where do you see the stumbling blocks from your experience? Again, not mentioning particular company names or anything else, but I know that you've done this before and you're helping others do this. Where do you see the stumbling blocks or the, let's say, the impedance, if you will?
Yeah, this is a huge question. So let me try to structure the answer because there's quite a few dimension here. Probably the first one is starting with the top of any company, making sure that it is part of the vision to utilize intelligent automation, to that it is business critical, it is considered as business critical, that that the leadership understand why it is needed. We see that if it is driven bottom up, it typically does not scale. So once you have support from the leadership, it is part of the vision. It is also very important that the expectation is set correctly. And what I mean by that is very often we tend to overestimate the return or wrongly estimate the return, and we tend to underestimate the required investment across the organization, right? So if this is there and there's willingness and there's a structure or set of structures that are put in place to support this, it typically has a greater chance to really scale. The second dimension, which is kind of connected to that, is how we communicate within the organization, how we bring the story to the people. It has to be a good news conversation very often because the communication is missing, because you know all the non-technology aspect are not correctly covered, like HR, for example, and defining a career path for people after the business unit is automated. Because all of that is missing, it is basically sending a negative signal to the organization. It's not establishing win-win between the bot and the human, and that's typically also slowing down the collaboration from the human, slowing down the understanding of what needs to be done in order to automate. So those are very, very important. They are not technology related, but they are extremely important if you want to be serious about this. Another aspect that is also to take into account is, in order to automate, you need to understand the environment. In order to understand the environment, you need to have access to the data. Depending on how well the data is managed, how well it is available, depending on whether it's structured, unstructured, whether it's highly digitized or not. So the availability of the data, the quality of the data is absolutely critical to enable automation, right? So those are for me, the top item. Obviously, there's a challenge with the technology. It's not simple. It's complex. It's a lot of new tools, a lot of new skills to learn, a lot of help that is, I think, required, or training that is required to master all those technologies. So obviously, the technology is there. Obviously, there is also a notion of effort and cost that needs to be taken into account. But I would say for me, if you get top-down support, if it's baked in the company vision, if it's properly communicated, sent as a good news message, and if the data is there, you're off for a good start to automate your environment. I don't know, Pascal, whether you want to add something, whether I'm missing something, but that's how I look at it.
Pascal, anything you would add?
Yeah, it completely makes sense. And so part of the research that we did while writing the book was about identifying what were the reasons why those companies were succeeding while other ones were not. And completely aligned with what you said, the involvement and the sponsorship of management, change management and communication aspects. So basically putting the people in the center of the transformation, because people will implement and then will use those automations. So they should be in the center of those. Thirdly, and what we said at the beginning, is connecting different technologies to create synergies and be able to automate complex end-to-end processes. The two additional ones that we identified out of as a common point from those companies that succeeded in scaling that transformation. The first one is the democratization of intelligent automation by using technologies such as low-code platforms that require limited skills to build IA applications. They make IA accessible to most business users, and as a result, two things. First of all, they accelerate the transformation speed, because you have more people implementing, so the speed of the overall transformation is higher. And secondly, and most importantly, it drives a better ownership of the transformation and acceptance of the transformation by the people, knowing that everyone is capable now with those technologies to participate in the transformation. So they own the transformation and they are part of it, and it changes the overall mindset and culture of the company, getting to more automatization and digitalization. And the last one is about leveraging technology to implement IA, to implement it faster and at a broader scale. Ironically, today, IA transformations are extremely manual and human intensive, and this limits the scale. Okay, so the use of IA technologies to support the implementation of IA transformations is critical. For example, process discovery, process mining, auto ML, auto machine learning, or the capacity to maintain automatically and on a self-sufficient manner a pool of applications and robots. This really helps. I mean, I've seen it accelerating a transformation by a factor of 2 times, 2 to 5 times, just to show how important it is.
It makes sense. And this is one common thread, Pascal, between your comments and Olivier's was the importance of kind of, I will say, selling the vision, right? Just using the words, right? And getting internal PR, if you will. In our industry, we all like to say that this is a disruptive technology. But when you think about that, is that really good or is it bad? No one really wants to be disrupted. So here you are, right? So assuming in a top-down scenario, you go knock on the door of HR or finance or whatever group you want to knock on the door with, and you say, hey, we want to introduce this. And in some cases, it's received well. In other cases, it's rejected, right? So what do you see, Pascal? I mean, what is, I guess, your advice to those who want to make sure that that they're received well, right? That there's support, that there's cooperation, and knowing that human nature is fear of change. No one likes, when we've all had that scenario where somebody says, "I'm here from headquarters and I'm here to help," right? That's always the beginning of a bad meeting. So, what have you learned, and what could you share with the audience here as to maybe best practices around getting to a good place with that target process or that target function?
So I think the critical dimension in a change management program that is required for any IA transformation is first of all to inform the people. Okay, what are we going to do? Why are we going to do that? and what will be the consequences and the impacts for the company, but also for themselves. And I think it's very important to be very transparent on those discussions. The first, so as I said, the first one is to inform and to communicate. The second one is to educate. So so it's about training the people, getting them involved, getting them to understand what it is and how they can use them for themselves to serve their own interests. For example, automating tasks that they don't like to do, being able to go back to their family earlier in the evening, or being able to perform tasks that today they can't do because it would require 10 brains to do it. Okay, so the capacity to augment them, and education is a key component for those people to then be actors of the transformation and own the transformation. And as I said before, in the democratization of IA, it is really critical to get people, when they are involved in the transformation, they own the transformation, and they become they will help the transformation happen.
Okay.
They will make everything to make it happen.
Yeah, owning it, that's a good word, right? They feel they're part of it as opposed to being victimized by it, if you will. So I want to challenge something that both you and...
So I want to add something here that is looking at history. So it's not the first time that, I mean, if we look at intelligent automation and the automation of the work done by knowledge worker, right? It is a revolution. It is basically a service automation revolution. And it's not the first time that we have, revolution in the industry. And when we look at history, it's always the same. There's a pattern, right? There's something very disruptive. People are very afraid that it will take their job. And at the end of the day, when we look at what happened in the past, we always go to a better place, and there's always more job for everyone. So I think it is important to understand and acknowledge that this is not different. We can look at the physical automation in factories. In the, I don't know, car factory, the jobs are not gone. They are just different. And it's the same here. And people should look at history, and they should feel comfortable about what is happening in that, in that industry with service automation, I think.
No, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. And in most organizations that I've spoken to, the things we're talking about automating are in many cases the things that they don't want to do anyway. They kind of feel it's below their pay grade. It's a distraction. It's not the part of their job that they get gratification out of. So this concept of being focused on maybe highest and best use of your time or more strategic value add, ultimately when you get to have that kind of a conversation, as you both alluded to, it ends up being a more forward-thinking and productive discussion. But I want to challenge the concept of top-down. So I'll tell you a quick story. So about a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago, I'm in London. I'm moderating a panel, and on the topic of this topic, similar topic, just automation in the broadest sense. And I had several leading advisors on my panel, and they all agreed about the importance of doing this from a top-down approach. And then I decided, just to have fun, because I had a feeling I knew where it would go, I surveyed the audience, and 80% of the audience was doing bottoms up. It was grassroots and very departmental. So then I wonder, is that all that bad, right? Because you could argue, especially if you go back 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, most C-level executives weren't even aware of this. There might have been more forward-thinking people at the time in the organization, like you guys, right, that were there saying, I think we could do something. And then thanks to some of the RPA tools, low cost, low barrier to entry, opportunity to experiment, is it all that bad if these projects pop up so people get some experience and people get to dabble and maybe get some small wins, and then maybe ultimately connect and maybe even sell or persuade leadership that this is real and there should be some real money and focus behind it? Do you see that as more of the natural way to go, or would you challenge that? Either one of you want to take that.
Yeah. So let me go first. The way I look at it is, so first, it's a life cycle, and it typically starts with, as you mentioned, people looking at the new shiny object and doing under the desk type of experiment, right? So this is very natural before large corporation embraces a new technology, right? It takes a little while, and there's always people who want to try everything new, anything new. Now, the real question here is, is it better to go top down or bottom up? And I think the answer is you need both, right? You need both because the nature of what you can do top down is very different versus what you can do bottom up. It's extremely difficult to have major transformation driven bottom up. If you want to, redesign an entire process, if you want to change totally how you do business and embed intelligent automation into one of your business critical process, then you have to have a top-down approach. Having said that, the bottom up is extremely interesting because not only, as Pascal mentioned, it is driving ownership across the organization, but there's always the end of the tail in terms of opportunity that can only be captured by having a distributed approach, a grassroots approach, by having citizen developer collecting. So I think for me the ideal world is, let's identify clearly what has to be driven top down and what needs to be driven in a decentralized way by citizen developers thanks to local type of technology. Also, what is typically extremely complex technically is much better driven centrally, right? Because it's difficult to have the level of expertise required to master the technology.
Okay, no, fair point. So let's shift from top down to more business led. So Pascal, in one of the sections of your book, you talk about automation as a business imperative, right? And the importance of it being more business driven. In spite of the fact that many of the efforts that we see out there tend to be, you could argue, more maybe the technology team, right? Maybe a little bit more of a science experiment in some organizations. Could you talk to why you felt that this topic was important enough to be in your book, and maybe your advice and recommendations to those that are listening to us here today?
So sorry, Frank. If this question is for me, I couldn't. I don't know why. We had an interruption in the flow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
The other question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Might be my Wi-Fi. So my question was more around. I was referring to, in your book, you referred to the importance of automation as a business imperative. This is one of the sections of your book. Definitely. So could you touch on the importance of it being more business driven, maybe even process driven, and less technology driven?
Yes, definitely. So on that point, business versus technology, in my view, technology is a tool to serve a business objective, okay, and it should never be the opposite. I've seen so many companies just being attracted by shiny tools. They started to play with those, and finally, after spending a lot of workload and a lot of money in those investments, wondering what they can do with that. Okay, that's really the wrong way to see things. Back to your point, IA is a business imperative, definitely. Based on the research we did, about half of the S&P 500 companies are likely to be replaced over the next 10 years. So so IA is not only a question of competitiveness, but also of business survival, and we witness it, especially in these COVID times, where companies which have digitalized themselves and automated themselves resist better and even thrive in these times. So I'm not afraid to say that companies that can't sell products and services online, collect the cash online, motivate their employees remotely, and manage operations remotely with minimal human intervention are currently only alive in these times thanks to government subsidies. Okay, so from differentiator, IA has become now a business imperative, a survival element for companies.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes total sense. So it's time for our second and last poll, Laura. So if you could get our second polling question up there, let's see how our attendees here weigh in. By the way, I just want to remind those of you here, any questions you have, feel free to type them in the question box there. So, okay, so we want to talk about, where's the impedance on the line, right? So the question to you here in attendance of which of the following is most negatively impacting your automation program's time to value, right? So think of the overall kind of mean time to goodness, as I like to call it. And again, if you're a practitioner, share with what you see in your environment. If you're an advisor or service provider, you could be, reference more of a client or customer that you're working with. So is it complexity, budget, available resources, right? Which I'm hearing from people, overall cultural resistance. So let's take a few seconds on that, and then let's see. This should be interesting to see how folks weigh in on this one. Wow, very interesting. Very interesting. So, we talked about disruptive software or disruptive technology, I should say, being disruptive, and therefore not everybody embraces it with open arms. So, I could see where in overall, culturally, human nature, resistance to change, most leaders probably not embracing the idea of saying, hey, we have an idea, you have 1,000 people reporting to you, and after we implement this idea, you might have 500 people reporting to you. So it might be some of that, but let's talk about the resources for a moment. I mean, for the most part, there's a lot of friction, both on the buy side and the sell side. And I, like you guys, talk to all parties involved in these efforts. It's still a fairly resource intensive effort. So Olivia, I'll come to you. Any thoughts on how to minimize some of that friction when it comes to the research required to identify who are the players in the space, and then the resources required to evaluate a POC, a POV, and then the resources required in some cases to integrate and customize? Any lessons learned there? I know you have some battle scars, Olivia. Any thoughts or lessons learned there? Hi, Olivia, you still there? And Laura, if you could flip us back. Thank you. Oh, we lost. So, all right. So we'll switch over to you, Pascal. What are you seeing from your research in the book as to, and talking to many hundreds of people you're probably speaking to since you've launched the book, as to how do people deal with the reference? And I'll give you one quick story. I spoke to someone recently who talked about the people and the time and the effort and the budget involved with evaluating one piece of software, 3 or 4 months. And then he says to me, how do I do this now multiple times? I want to, so in other words, it just didn't seem, the process itself didn't even seem scalable or sustainable. Any lessons learned there, or advice to those maybe on the front end of this? Pascal, question to you.
So you're talking here about vendor selection, technology selection that might be time consuming. So there is, yeah. So the first thing in terms of leading practices and that I've seen, the first thing to do is to clarify what are the needs and to scope them very clearly. So that we can clearly identify on the market which technologies can satisfy those needs. And it's then about I think the rigor and the governance around those selection processes are critical success factors. It's about identifying what are the criteria that we are looking for to satisfy those needs, and being able to tangibly select using systems of ratings and weightages across those criteria. Those are the leading practices I've seen.
Okay, super. And Olivier, any lessons learned, any advice, any tricks up your sleeve to avoid the fact that it may take 3 or 4 people on the sell side, it may take 2 or 3 or 4 people on the buy side to evaluate or to prove out the value in one particular piece of software, knowing that organizations, like maybe some you're helping, maybe investigate or evaluate maybe a half a dozen or a dozen more products a year. Has anybody cracked the code on how to minimize the friction, just even in the evaluation process?
Yeah, and yeah, I lost you for a little while, but I got the question. So a bit of experience here. I give you a practical example. We evaluated a specific space called AI Ops. And the approach there was, how do we understand who is the right player for us? And obviously the market is pretty crowded and there's a lot of very good players. So it starts with trying to industrialize this. So not just playing with the technology for the sake of discovering features, but having a clear understanding of what you are targeting. So it starts with very good understanding of the KPI, both technical, but also most importantly, business KPI that you are trying to impact with that piece of technology, and a very good baseline to understand how this technology is modifying, is impacting that baseline. So once you have done this homework, then you can have a very industrialized approach to this, and you can talk to multiple vendors in parallel, and honestly you can even play a little bit of competition across the vendor to see who is going to have the best and biggest impact or the best value for money. So I think it helps a lot not to take a POC POV as I'm testing features and I see if the technology is cool. Again, business first. How does that impact your baseline? Assuming you know which KPI you want to look at, and then you can run them in parallel, and you can have the vendor, a lot of them are willing to invest time and energy on their side to demonstrate their value. So I think it can scale like this. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's way better and easier versus playing with every piece of shiny technology and see how cool it is.
No, it makes total sense. So I have a couple of tactical questions, only knowing that people who are here had asked me to make sure I ask some very tactical questions. So one is, you both, maybe you could argue, we all three agree the importance of leadership support. Where in the organization do you think this should be anchored? I'll start with you, Pascal. Meaning, should this be, so that means somebody, a person, ideally, is leading the effort? Do you believe it should be should it be a CIO, a CFO? Should it be driven by someone else? Should it be some sort of a automation or AI steering committee? What do you see as the ideal center of gravity, Pascal, as to who should be kind of leading the charge, if you will?
Yes, the companies that I've seen succeeding in those transformations all had a clear sponsorship from management, and the highest level of management is preferred here. So think of CEO, COO, CIO. Those people, and I mean, it's key to get their involvement and their sponsorship, because we will need to talk about important changing, as we talked about, in the organization, impacting the people, impacting the processes, and probably significant investment to get significant benefits. Okay, so this requires the involvement of the highest level in the hierarchy. Those people will be involved in approving the business case. So basically, what will be the return on investment that is expected for the transformation? They will be involved in the overall program sponsorship. Okay, it's going to be more of a supervision type of role. Below this, they need of course to act on the ground. And what we've seen being successful is the organization of a, as you said, steering committee with the key departments involved in the IA transformation. So gathering finance managers, procurement managers, I mean, all the functions, HR managers, all the functions that are benefiting from the transformation, so that they can all agree and align on the objectives and put together their resources to get the transformation succeed. And so that's for the governance. And then for the execution, we need a center of excellence, okay, led by an IA leader, which will be in charge of two key things. The center of excellence will be in charge of implementing the transformation according to the roadmap that has been validated at top level, and also innovating, meaning constantly having a look on the market towards what are the new technologies and new capabilities that can help the company to get more benefits in the future.
Super. Okay, thank you. Olivier, I want to get to ROI. I know you are an automation, intelligent automation superhero, and I know one of your superpowers is helping people determine and achieve ROI. Disappointing ROI is one of the most common complaints we hear right out there. And so my first question related to that is, what have most companies maybe done wrong to date? Are the expectations wrong? Are they going about it wrong? Are they not bringing the business team in? Like, how do you get to the point of saying, hey, we're not getting ROI, and then you find out the guy down the hall, he's doing something similar, maybe even similar technology, and he or she can show ROI. So first question is, maybe most common mistakes as to approach, and then follow-on question is, what are your recommendations? Knowing what you know now, years later, after doing this many times and helping other people, what is your advice as to the right way?
Yeah. So first of all, to be fair, the noise on the market is definitely not helping, at least initially. When there's a new piece of technology, we know it's just a fact that there's always a lot of hype and a lot of false expectation around how a new technology can change the world from day one. So a lot of company are influenced by what they hear on the market. So it is important to really re-baseline that and have a proper expectation, a fair expectation around the size of the impact and the time to value that you can really get in your environment, right? So that's something that is important for top leadership to be well advised around what to expect. As I said initially, a typical mistake around the return is wrong calculation of the return in terms of size of the impact, or not really looking at the return in a correct way, or frankly, if you do that in a vacuum, not really understanding what the return can be or could be. On the investment side, people have a tendency to focus on technology, spend the money on technology, play with the technology, but they forget about all the other dimensions that we discussed. I mean, this is a very typical mistake that is impacting the ROI. If you don't have the right investment to impact the processes, redesign the processes, lean the processes, then please don't automate, right? We know that you only want to automate against a lean process, otherwise you have a large mess. If you don't take into account the organization changes, the operating model changes, the HR impact, the MOC impact, right? So there's a lot of things that needs to be driven from an investment standpoint that will definitely be required if you want to have a decent time to value. So typically, to be fair, if you are not helped by outside organization that can help you calibrate correctly your expectation, there's a high risk that you start this journey with maybe it's easy, it's quick, and it's going to be a huge impact, and it's not the case. It's complex, it's difficult, it takes time. So it's not something that is easy, but if you do it and you do it right, the return is also extremely significant.
No, that's a fair point. And listen, I took the opportunity at the outset of this discussion to plug Pascal's book. I want to plug your services, Olivier, to those here. OG is one of the top guys in the space on helping organizations really determine on the front end what kind of ROI they can get, and also ensuring, based on the right execution and the right approach to realize that ROI. So I agree. I would recommend a third party, and OG is one of the go-to guys. I would encourage you to at least connect with him on LinkedIn and initiate a discussion. So with the few minutes we have left, Pascal, when I think about ROI, I think about, okay, the R, which at the end of the day is what we're all looking for, right? And I'm curious what you see, either based on your research prior to launching the book and or your discussions after launching the book, which I think LinkedIn kind of slowed down after you launched your book. There was so much traffic about your book. I think all of us, I think you seized LinkedIn. It just suspended for a while. But what are you seeing? Are people just looking for the same old stuff? Are they looking for cost save? Are they looking? I'm seeing a lot around labor cost reduction and increased productivity, whatever the heck that means, productivity. What are you really seeing as far as the R and the ROI that people are looking for? If you had to mention maybe the top 4 or 5, what are they looking for?
What are they looking for, or what they should be looking for?
You pick. Yes.
Very often, what we see is companies looking for short-term profits, and as OG just mentioned, those transformations are long-term transformations. Okay, they need time. They take time because they impact strongly the processes, the people, the organization. So it's very important that not to have a short-termist strategy around it. That said, most of the return on investment I've seen are not beyond 12 months. Okay, so those are good, still very good ones. I would mention on top of those efficiency benefits that we talked about, productivity enhancements that we talked about, the capacity to really help employee experience and help customer experience. Okay, those two aspects are very important in a business, and I think they really make the success of a business. Of course, customer experience is critical. This is driving the revenue, the top line of any company, and that's necessary to generate profits. What we've seen as an outcome of using intelligent automation has been the increase in satisfaction of customers by more than 50 percentage in net promoter score, for example. Or in another dimension, the decrease of workload in call centers by half. Okay, those are the impacts that we've seen on the client side. On the employee side, I mean, I start with a quote. The companies that are, and this is coming from Harvard Business Review, the companies that are focusing and taking care of their employee experience are 4 times more profitable than the other ones. So that shows the importance of employee experience, not only for employees, but also for the companies and for the return on investment.
The customers. Oh, very interesting. So with the few minutes we have left, let's talk about kind of maybe use cases or case studies. I know there are many in your book. You know, in the world of that I'm in, I focus only on two areas, right? Intelligent automation of end-to-end processes. One is in endpoint management. Think of digital workplace, PC, laptop, desktop. That's one use case. The second one is RPA, bot operation management. We have a lot of activity in both of those areas where people are looking for greater efficiencies and more labor independence, right? Greater response time, et cetera. But those are only two of one could argue of several hundred ultimately in an organization. I'm curious within your book if you had to mention a few. So if someone's thinking of low-hanging fruit, where should they target? Obvious areas, Pascal, where they should consider an effort around automation of end-to-end. Do you like finance? Do you like HR? Do you like claims processing? What do you like?
So that's the magic of intelligent automation is that it's universal. It's applicable across industries and across functions. So there is no preferred one. It really depends on your business, on your organization, on what you do. Okay. I've seen clients being successful starting with finance, other ones starting with sales. There is no one truth here.
And if I may add here, this is really critical. Understanding the use cases, i.e., understanding how to apply intelligent automation in your environment, because very often people don't know. They have a piece of technology, they have a tool, but they don't know what to do with it. And it is through the use cases that they understand what to do with the technology, and more importantly, what is the expected impact. So whether you look at industry as a dimension, across all industry, it's applicable. Whether you look at the business process as a dimension, it's applicable across all business process, right? The point being here is there's still a lot more use cases that will be created, that will be invented, that will be discovered, and it's just a matter of time before it's truly pervasive, right? So right now, the technology itself has no limitation. The limitation is for the human to define and articulate how to best utilize the technology in their context, i.e. industry business process.
No, it makes sense. Alrighty, we're running into the top of the hour. So I just want to wrap. I want to say, Pascal Bornet, thank you so much for the book and for the time and your dedication and passion, if you will, in this space. Olivier Gomez, I always appreciate seeing what's OG approved out there in the marketplace. I love to see all the things you're doing out there, helping people with ROI and helping in general. I have a slide up here now. If you are not already connected, once again, on LinkedIn with Pascal and Olivier, if you're one of the few who are not connected with them, be sure to do that. We have email there as well if you want to connect with myself or Pascal or Mr. OG. And again, good luck to each of you. This is still an evolving field, as you can tell by this, and we will have more webinars and podcasts available in the near future. So again, gentlemen, thank you both. And to those in attendance, have a great day and enjoy the intelligent automation journey. I'm sure we'll see you again soon. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.